All right, guys, welcome to a brand new episode of SideQuest Podcast. Listen in and level up. I have a great episode for you today, but first, as always, let's get through the show notes. If you're not following the Facebook page, head over to Facebook, type SideQuest Fitness into the search bar, and like the page. There, you're going to get updates on podcast episodes, articles when they get posted, and you're going to get a brand new taco recipe every Tuesday for taco camp. Plus lots of other shenanigans and nerd talk throughout the week, so make sure you head over to Facebook. You can follow me on Instagram. My handle is SideQuestFM. If you want to see some cool videos and random stuff on Instagram as well, you can follow me on Instagram, same handle, SideQuestFM, or follow me on Snapchat, SideQuestFit. Follow me there. Send me your questions. I want to get all the questions from you, help you as much as I can on your fitness journey or your journey in life, whatever it may be. But head over to Snapchat, SideQuestFit. Follow me there. You get a little more personal, in-depth look at the shenanigans I get into throughout every day. But I do love getting questions from the community, so please send them out to me. If you have not left a review for the podcast, please head over to iTunes. If you're not listening on iTunes and you listen on SoundCloud or Stitcher, leave a review there as well. When you leave reviews, it helps me move up the charts on the iTunes store so that more people can see and hear the amazing guests that I've had on and have on each and every single week. So make sure you head over there. And don't forget, if you haven't picked up your copy of the 7 Principles of Fat Loss, head over to sidequestfitness.com/7 principles, and you can pick up your copy of the 7 Principles of Fat Loss. These are the same 7 principles I follow each and every day and teach my clients to help them shred away more body fat, unlock heroic strength, and just look better naked. So if you want to unlock strength or just look better naked in the mirror, head over again, grab those 7 principles of fat loss, and start following those today. With 2017 right around the corner, that means you are starting to think about New Year's resolutions. Fitness and getting in shape is one of the biggest resolutions people make every year. But every year, halfway through January, almost 30% of people have given up. They quit. 6 months in, that number is even smaller, or people who are still going with their New Year's resolution. But why wait? Why wait until the gyms get packed in January? Why put it off until after the holidays? Start today. I still have a few spots open in my online coaching program. So if you're interested in losing fat, building strength, or gaining muscle this winter, head over to sidequestfitness.com/coach and apply today. My program is custom designed for your specific goals. I'll tell you exactly what you need to do or not to do to help you finally achieve your goal of gaining strength, losing fat, or building muscle. You have constant accountability. I know what it's like to do this by yourself. It's dangerous to go alone. And most of the time, that's what you try to do in the new year. You try and do this alone. You hire a trainer at the local gym, but they only keep you accountable when you see them. And the real battle is out in the real world, not in the gym. The real world is where you spend the majority of the time. And with an online coach, you have access to me 24/7 to answer your questions and help you succeed in your goals. You can consider me your Gandalf guiding you on your quest. You also get access to an app that I use online that you can use on your phone. So your program is right there no matter what, with videos to guide you through the exercises if you have any questions on anything. So if you want to stop feeling weak, unconfident, or depressed about how you look naked, then head over to sidequestfitness.com/coach and apply today. And let's start kicking some ass together. Let's get your goals on track for the new year. And let's not wait until 2017 to get started. Let's start today. Let's start kicking some ass, shredding some fat, putting on muscle, or leveling up your strength today. So head over to sidequestfitness.com/coach and apply. All right, guys, I have a great episode for you today. My good friend JC Deen returns to the show. It's been almost a year and a half since I had him on. We got to catch up last February so almost a year ago in Austin for a business mastermind that I was in. We've been chatting back and forth since, but he's a really great guy. Tons of great value in this episode. We get a little philosophic and a little deep in areas, so I hope you guys enjoy that as well. But let's get into the episode and hear from the one and the only JC Deen.
Step up and you gotta get it fitness. Host Rob at the moment and the quest is you gotta check it and wreck it. You're breaking personal records and with the help of the guests you won't be guessing on the lessons. That's a +5 fierce. Got a low-key bamf right here. You wanna meet him, there's no better way to greet him than to strike a boss pose. Take a look into the mirror.
All right, guys, welcome to the show. As I mentioned, I have a returning guest again. It's been a while since I had him on the show, but we got to catch up a few months ago, almost actually like 9-10 months ago, when I was in Austin for the first mastermind that we had in Austin. We got to catch up and hang out and do a little drinking and chat previously the first time. But the one and the only JC Deen is on the show. JC, welcome back.
Thanks so much for having me again. It's pretty good.
It was great to have you on the first time, and I really enjoyed us getting to know each other a little bit more in Austin. But I wanted to get you back on and chat. We were talking beforehand that you're out in San Jose right now. We were talking about the time difference. What's been your biggest struggle with the time difference? Do you forget that, like, oh, right, my mom is like 2-3 hours ahead, and you call her at like 10 o'clock at night, and she's like, I'm in bed. What's wrong?
No, that's exactly it. Like, that is the biggest issue that I've run into, just being so, egocentric to my own time and my own space. And I just tend to forget that a lot of the people I am in touch with are either on Central Time or on East Coast time. And so, it'll be 8 o'clock here. I'll be finishing dinner, hanging out, and like I'll shoot a text to, a friend on the East Coast, or I'll call them or whatever. And then I realize they're, sleeping or winding down or whatever. And, or I'll stay up really late and I'm like, oh, it's only midnight. Like, they're probably still out, but in reality it's 3 a.m. and then I text them or whatever. And then the next day they're like, dude, I've been sleeping for the last 3 or 4 hours. And I'm like, oh yeah. So yeah, that's probably the most difficult thing.
I have a friend in Vegas who, besides somehow always calling like right in the middle of having sex, I'm like, really? How's it? Like, the only time he ever calls me is then. He's called me before at like 1 or 1:30 his time, completely just wasted in Vegas. And it's like the time I'm getting up to go to work, and I'm like, oh, right. He forgets that it's 3 hours ahead of time, and he's calling to like catch up and say what's up. And I'm like, bro, I'm just getting up to go to work. And he's like, what? I'm like, yeah, you're partying at 1 a.m. I'm going to work. Crazy.
That's hilarious. Yeah, that's pretty good.
So JC, I've enjoyed all the work you've done, and I had you on the show a long time ago, and we got to catch up, and you told a great story about moving a piano, which was hilarious, into one of your first apartments. But you're also one of the first guys to really sort of jump into the online, blog sphere. I know Jordan Syatt was like, get a website now.
Mm-hmm.
And you were like, okay. And you weren't really sure what to do, but you've grown your business, you've expanded, and you come and you talk to us, at the mastermind back in February. So I had a double question. You've been in the game for a while. How have you conquered fear? Like, how did you conquer fear to get started? And how has that changed over time? Are there still fears you conquer? Do those steps still work, or have you had to morph that for new ventures that you go into?
Sure. So that is a good question. Let's start with the first part, I guess. How I conquered fear initially. So it was 2010. I was still in college full time, and I had just quit a part-time job, and I kind of had like 6 months worth of savings, and I was like, I got to figure this out. And I had a conversation in my crummy apartment on a Saturday morning or something, and I was chatting with Alan Aragon, and I was like, look, man, I got 6 to 8 months worth of savings. I am in school. I just quit a job I hate. I don't really want to go back to a 9-to-5 at this point, and I need to make this fitness thing work. And he just encouraged me. He, at the time I was pretty close to him, and I had been chatting with him a lot, and he just encouraged me. He's like, look, man, I believe in you. I think you can do this. You're smart. You have the chops, and you got a good message, and I think you can help people, and you're a good writer, so I think you should just do this. And that was ultimately what really helped me conquer that fear of the unknown and not really knowing what I was going to do, and especially being in school and needing to figure out how I was going to pay for everything and that whole deal. So just kind of relying on someone else's belief in me before I had it in myself really helped kind of conquer that fear. If I didn't have the encouragement from Roman, he was also someone that helped me. And if I didn't have the encouragement from Alan Aragon around that same time, they both contributed in very different ways to the belief in myself. But if I didn't have that initial push from Alan and then a push right after that from Roman, I'm not sure that I would have been able to conquer it as well as I did. So I think having those mentors early on and just having people you look up to can help a lot. And so their belief in me helped build a belief in myself that I could do this. And then as far as how some things I struggle with now, I think that was the second question, how I continue to conquer fear, right?
Yeah.
So how I kind of do it now, it's changed a lot, but it's still similar in some regard. Just individually, and I think a lot of people will probably be able to relate to this, and I feel kind of vulnerable talking about it, but I'll do it anyway, whatever. I don't think that struggle with the belief in yourself ever goes away. I think we all deal with that. And, I think if you're not feeling imposter syndrome every once in a while, and you're not feeling like maybe you're not good enough or whatever, you don't know enough, I think if you're not feeling that every once in a while, then there might be something wrong with your guiding compass or whatever you want to call it. But, I struggle with that every once in a while. And one of the biggest pieces of advice that someone actually gave to me earlier this year, a guy by the name of Dan Meredith, I worked with him one-on-one for some coaching, just like business and mindset stuff for a while. And one of the biggest things he said to me was like, look, man, you just got to get out of your own head. You are a thinker. You are someone who broods, someone who thinks so much. And I am a thinker. And, being in my own head, being caught up in my own head has kind of kept me from putting things out into the world or doing more when I was definitely capable of it. And so one of the ways I've learned to conquer that fear within the last few years is just kind of pushing myself into that zone of discomfort. And, I'm not going to, I hate it when people say you have to be comfortable with being uncomfortable, because that's kind of a silly saying, right? Like no one is comfortable in that mode of discomfort. Like no one is ever comfortable that way. But there is a like you have to be okay with going into that territory. Like it's not going to be fun. It's like a cold shower, right? Like a cold shower is not going to feel good. It's the last thing you want to do, but it takes 1 minute or whatever, however long you do it, and once it's done, it's done. And then once it's over with, you're like, wow, I'm glad I went through that period of discomfort, because now it's over and now I'm a better person, whatever. So I've had to kind of do that over and over, especially as a writer and someone who's creative and someone who puts out content, someone who's, teaching people and coaching people. I'm often caught up in like, man, is this stuff good enough? Is this information easy enough to digest? Is this program good enough? Blah, 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 blah. All these thoughts in my head. So I've kind of had to push myself through that period of just being uncomfortable with whatever I'm creating or whatever I'm doing. And that's not always the easiest. And I got caught in a period where I kind of just didn't do anything for a long time. Like I had people reach out to me on social media earlier. More middle of this year. They're like, are you still active? Are you doing stuff? And I'm like, yeah, I'm working. I'm working on a lot of stuff. I'm just not vocal. I'm not talking on Facebook. I'm not really on Twitter. I'm not really like publishing that much content. And truth of the matter was, like, I've been working on stuff all year, but a lot of the stuff has either been behind the scenes or stuff that's not out in the open. And a lot of it was, stuff that's come to fruition in the last couple months, and then some of it was just I was kind of stuck in my head in some cases. So I would say the thing that I have confronted most within the last year is just pushing through the voices in my head, so to speak, of oh, this is not good enough. Mostly perfectionism. I would say perfectionism is the easiest way to put it. Stop trying to be perfect, just be good enough, because most of the time, perfectionist people, their good enough is, it's fine. I guess that's the way I should say it. It's totally fine. And so that's what I've had to push through the most. But having a conversation with Dan Meredith earlier this year was very much, he was like, look, man, he's like, I followed you for the last few years. I bought all your stuff and you're just stuck in your head, man. You got to get out of it. And it's kind of funny how that brought up many different conversations with many different people soon thereafter that I didn't realize I would have. And it was true. So I'm constantly pushing myself to make things as good as they need to be and be okay with, not being perfect. And that's what I have to do. So, yeah.
I think from a creative standpoint, that's the hardest thing to do. I remember in high school getting yelled at by my theater teacher. She was like, get out of your head. Like, while doing a monologue, like every line that like came out of my mouth, get out of your head, do it again. Deliver the line, get out of your head. And it was like, just constantly get out of your head. But eventually, once I did and just let myself do it, it was, it was fine. So how do you approach that with clients? Do you find that you sort of give out the medicine, but you're really like reluctant about taking your own medicine? Like when they come to you and they're trying to be perfect and you're like, no, you don't have to be perfect. But there you are struggling with perfectionism.
Yeah. So that's a very good question. I'm really glad you brought that up because I thought about that as I was going through my answer, and I'm glad you brought that up. So it's pretty interesting. A lot of times, and you get this, I'm sure too, with clients, they're trying to be perfect with the training and nutrition. And we've done this long enough that we know that that's just not possible. And even if you do aim for a perfect, you're probably not going to make it because you're eventually going to mess up. And if you go down that spiral of, thinking you're not good enough because you missed one training session out of 24 over the last however long period, right, and you missed one meal, it's not really the end of the world, right? It's one of those things. And I've had to remember as I'm telling my clients this, this is something I struggle with too. And as a result of that, I'm not off the hook just because I'm coaching them. So I have people that keep me in check. I actually check in with other people that are working on similar things that I am. And I set deadlines for myself. Like I've got a new piece of content that I've been working on for about 3 to 4 weeks. And it's a huge piece of content. So that's why it's taken me so long. But this week is the deadline. It's going to go out this week. Has to. It's not like it's rushed, but I could realistically spend a couple more weeks just like tweaking and fine tuning. But I know that's not what needs to happen. Like the people need the content. I need to get it off my plate so I can work on other things. It's more about just taking the action and doing it rather than trying to be perfect. And so you're right. Like when I go through clients with this and I'm helping them understand the process, I also help them understand too that this is not just an on and off switch, right? You're not just going to wake up and be a different person. That's one of the things I think is so interesting, especially in the marketing world, is there's always this, if you're familiar with the hero's journey, there's this
of course
whole period of like, there's the whole timeline. I won't go through it all, but like you're trying to figure things out and things seem like to be the worst. And then all of a sudden you decide to make this change and then you go on this journey and you learn all these things. But a lot of times when people are marketing towards people that are trying to lose weight or get in shape, whatever it is, there seems to be this really weird thing where they're like, I have this one key trick or this one thing that's going to turn your life around overnight. And people are really attracted to that because it's like, oh, there's just this one thing I need to fix. And once I fix that, everything's going to be perfect. But in reality, when you take the medicine, so to speak, and you start to do the thing, you realize that you can, things can look drastically different on a long enough timeline. So like say you started getting healthy and training, on day one, and then 1,000 days later, that's a long time. 2 or 3 years later, you're looking back and you're like, you look totally different. Your habits are changed. You feel better. You perform better. All these things are just 10 times better, right?
Yeah.
You can look at day one and day 1,000 and say, wow, I am completely different. But if you look at the change over that entire period, there was never one moment of this is the switch that you flipped. It was a period of moments. It was like, okay, I really hate how I feel right now, so I've got to get started. And then you start to make the change, and you might fall off for a little while, or you might get injured, or something might happen, and then you get through that obstacle, and then you kind of level up a little bit and you do a little bit better. So it's this gradual like push and pull to between two periods in time. And that's what I find myself constantly telling my clients who are working towards a goal. And they'll say, oh, I'm just really frustrated that I'm not where I want to be at this point. And I'm like, well, where were you 6 months ago? And they're like, well, I was really frustrated then, but now I'm further along. And I'm like, right. So and then I help them understand that it's not really just like one little thing they change, it's multiple things, but you kind of have to go at your own pace, and you kind of have to go in a way that makes sense. Because then the opposite is true. Like if you give somebody 10 things to change, how many things are they going to change? Probably 0, right?
Right. Yeah.
Probably going to get frustrated and overwhelmed. And that's where kind of the perfectionism thing kind of comes full circle. It's like you think everything has to be perfect. So even if you do something like 85% correctly or 90% correctly, it's still not good enough because it's not perfect. And then we can get caught in all kinds of traps, in that regard.
What's so interesting about the idea of perfect is that like it's almost like the saying, beauty is in the eye of the beholder. Like the perfect that you see, like I'll be honest, like yeah, I got really lean. I'd say probably the most lean I've ever been for a photo shoot back in June. I got the photos in, and I'm not gonna lie, there was a part of me that was like, oh, my abs look like shit. Like right. I don't really. And my sister was like, oh my God, you have like an 8-pack. And I'm like, I see like 6 with like a half of one at the bottom, maybe. But like everyone was like, oh my God, those look great. Like you look amazing. I'm like, oh, okay. So like, our idea of perfect is completely different than someone else's. And I think that's something that I'm sort of getting into now, sort of delving into my own mind and watching my wife go through her sort of, her hero's journey with what she's doing. And it is sort of this, she's struggling with perfectionism, and, I don't think I'm doing this perfect. And like, it doesn't matter that you don't need to go for perfect, just consistent. Like if you do it every day, you're going to be 10 times further than you were if you did it perfectly for 2 days and then got upset because you didn't do it perfect on the 3rd, 4th, and 5th day.
Sure.
So speaking of that, sort of on that same line as clients, and talking about perfectionism, what's one of the most important values that you try to display to your readers and your clients?
Yeah, so that is a good question. I think, especially with my clients and also to my readers as well, but the people that I work closely with really get to see this under the microscope. But this is going to sound vague, but I'll get into it a little more. But it's really what you do right now. It's really the habits that you create. It's the actions that you take right now that will determine whatever outcome it is that you're seeking, right?
Right.
And as far as a value standpoint, it's, I try to get people to think about what do they want and what does that mean, and then come back to what do they value in regards to that. So if you are, let's say you want 6-pack abs, you want to be in the best shape of your life, you want to deadlift 400 pounds, you want to do all these like things that just make you better, stronger, more fit. You want to do all those things. So that's what your goal is. Well, how do your values line up with that? And your values always have to come back to where you're at right now. So if you value time in the gym and you value quality training, then that is a good value that you have that will lead to that goal. But if you don't value time in the gym and you just go whenever you feel like it, where your values are don't really line up with the end goal. So we can apply this to eating too, right?
Yeah.
Like if you value 6-pack abs and you think that's something that you want to achieve, we know a couple things. That's going to require determination. It's going to require a time period of hard work. It's going to require dedication to tracking your food intake and making sure that you're eating, just enough to fuel your training sessions and recovery, but not enough to put on, excess body fat. And then you have to manage that over time. And that's not an easy thing if you've never really done it before.
Yep.
Like tracking macros for me is like the back of my hand. I don't care. I don't think about it. I just do it. And it's easy, right? But if you've never done it before, you're going to have to build that into your value system. Like, look, I really value this outcome and I want this to happen. So what I do on a daily basis is going to determine whether I get there. So if you really value that outcome and that's what you want, then the time you spend tracking your macros and doing a good job of managing your intake is going to have to be a priority. And so I try to help people understand that it's not about a special program. It's not about a special macronutrient split. It's not about any one thing, that's going to make or break you. It's really about the time that you spend on a daily basis and where you're at on a daily basis. And too often time we get caught up in the outcome and whatever that means or whatever we think that is, instead of getting caught up on what I call the process. If you train regularly, you eat according to your goals, that's the process. That's what you do every single day. The outcome is always going to be the outcome. It's always going to be in the future. That process will eventually lead to that outcome. But once you eventually get to that place, whatever got you to that place is still a part of your process. Because once you get 6-pack abs and the 400-pound deadlift, you're probably not going to stop eating the way you have been for the last 6 months. You're probably not going to stop deadlifting. You're going to do what you've been doing. So that process will eventually lead you to the outcome. And then you're going to have to figure out what the next step is. Do you keep going? Do you pull back? Do you do something else? And so I try to get people to understand that even as tempting as it is to look all over social media and Facebook and Instagram and see all these people that are already where you want to be or have achieved what you want to achieve, it's important to realize that they were in your place at one point.
Yeah.
Maybe it was 5 years ago, maybe it was 10 years ago, maybe it was 2 years ago. Depends on where they're at, right? And it's really important to remember that all we have is right now, and what we do now is what matters, not what we plan on doing tomorrow or what we think might be a good idea later. It's what we do today, and then, of course, that compounds over time.
Thank you. That actually means a lot, JC, because I'm not going to lie, as someone who's still new to being a fitness entrepreneur and in the online space, it is very hard to see like guys like you and Roman, of course, and hang out with them and hear all these stories. And you're like, I want to be there. And you're like, oh shit, I know it's a long time. It's a lot, but even we aren't, free from wishing and wanting it to happen overnight. I mean, hell, I'll be honest. I wish I could flip a switch or write one post that brought in 50 clients.
Right.
But it's a long game, and I think that's one of the biggest things that like I've taken away from watching Gary Vee stuff is just like patience. It's patience, and I'm having to tell myself that every day because as a kid, JC, I didn't think I just thought, oh, I'm going to pick up a basketball. I'm going to wish I could be Michael Jordan, and then I'm going to be Michael Jordan. It would have taken years, and I put in the work, and that's why it never happened. So, yeah. So speaking of that, oh man, it's so weird how like these questions and where we go sort of like, it's like it was predestined or some weird thing. It's just weird how it always does that. It like flows into each other.
Yeah, it's kind of cool.
You've written a lot about taking imperfect action, and that's sort of what we were talking about there. Just finding your values and aligning them. If you haven't read Mark Manson's new book, The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck, he talks about that in the book and how like when you trade your problems, when you choose to do something new, you're trading one set of problems for a whole new set of problems, which is just really like blew my mind a little bit because I was like, oh shit, you're totally right. Like if you want to get really lean, then you have to like sacrifice these foods. But once you get there, you're like, oh, well, I kind of want to stay here. What do I have to do? It's a whole new set of problems. What are you doing now that might be imperfect? And what's your process for accomplishing or, setting up those first couple of steps when you start a new venture or goal?
Yeah. So that's a loaded question. I'll try to just hone in on one thing. So first of all, you're like one of the many people that's told me about that book. So I guess I'm going to have to read it. I've loved Mark Manson's posts and stuff for a long time, and his articles are great. And so anyway, I'll have to check into that. But that's a really good way of looking at it. Like when you start something new, you are bringing on a whole other set of problems. And a lot of times we don't really think about that. We just think about all the great things about the new stuff we're starting. So let me just, I guess I'll just pick one thing. So I've mostly like been a writer at this point, right? For the last 5 years, I've just published content, written books, written tons of articles, and that's been my main mode of communication. I've done podcasting. That's actually a pretty good medium. Me and Raj did one for about a year or so. It was really cool, but it's not something that just really stuck with me. And that was just due to many other reasons. But one thing that I'm working on now, being more consistent with, is like video stuff, right? Yeah. So I know video is taking off, and video is one of those things that it's just another form of communication. It's kind of like back in the mastermind in Austin when Roman was like, look, first and foremost, you got to become a good writer. And if you don't become a good writer, pick the next best thing that you are good at. So whether it be video or audio or whatever. But he was basically saying that like writing will stand the test of time. You know, that's one of those things. Well, it looks like video is going to be one of the next major mediums. So I am working on video stuff fairly consistently. And some stuff I'm actually doing behind the scenes. It's not even really for my own work. It's for other people that I'm working with. So I'm getting some experience there working on video stuff, but I'm also doing my own YouTube channel, and I'm putting out video content there too. So for me, one of the hardest things, and I actually made a video about this that I know you saw and you talked about, but I did one of the videos on why you should take imperfect action. Mm-hmm. And I did this video for two reasons. It actually was leading up to the launch of a course that I have right now called 4D Fat Loss, and that's 4D like the fourth dimension, and just so you don't think 40 like 40, but 4D Fat Loss, and that was leading up to the release of the first course, or the first time I was doing that course. And the theme of 4D Fat Loss is primarily building habits that stick and creating momentum for yourself. And so I made the video as a way of leading up to that launch, because so many people are caught up on this idea of everything has to be perfect or everything has to be a certain way. And so I caught myself with videos. I wouldn't publish videos because I would come up with all these reasons why the script wasn't good enough, or my message wasn't good enough, or I didn't deliver it well enough, or the lighting sucked, or whatever it was. And I would come up with all these excuses, and then I realized, like, wow, videos don't have to be perfect. They just have to be good enough, and they have to be coherent, and, you know, you have to get something from them, right? And so I kind of made the video as a way of, so the first one was to kind of be the release of 4D Fat Loss. And the other reason was to kind of be a reminder to myself, right? Like, yeah. I made the video obviously because I had a good message in it, but I also made the video for myself. Like, just take imperfect action. It doesn't have to be perfect. You know, the first time you ever tried something, it was never perfect, and you just did it. And that's why we call it practice. You know, I always go back to my athletic days when I was first learning how to run a route, you know, and catch a football. I didn't run the route correctly the first time, or maybe I ran too fast and ran past the stop, or maybe I didn't run fast enough, or something went wrong. But over time, you practice and you get it, you know, it's better and better and better. But you don't, like, if you have someone else that's kind of giving you advice and guiding you, you don't always second guess yourself because they're the one giving you the advice. But if you know you need to put that video out and you don't have a rubric, you don't really have a guide, you're trying to figure this shit out by yourself, it can be really it can be daunting because, well, someone else does it this way and someone else does it this way. And this person wrote in a blog post that here are 5 tips. Well, I don't really like those, so what am I going to do? And there's all these things, right? So I made the video about taking imperfect action because you can have the best program in the world, but if you don't step foot in the gym and actually do the damn thing, well, you're never going to see the results from it. But if you have a program that's a little bit less than perfect and you get to the gym 4 days of that week, well, you're going to be a lot further along in 12 months if you just train 4 days instead of having a 6-day program that you never actually do. And so while that action may be imperfect, it's going to get you closer and closer to where you want to be. And you're actually way better off in the long term. It's better to do something every single day that's not perfect than wait for the perfect time to do it. You know, I forget, I think it was Mike Vacanti said something in one of his videos I really liked. He was like, I'm only looking for, a step forward every single day. I'm not asking for, he said something like, it's better to take the step every single day than do something perfectly 6 times throughout the year. So if you do something every single day and it's imperfect, that is 365 times you could practice rather than doing it 6 times perfectly. Right. And by the time you get to that end goal or that end time, you have 365 reps versus 6 or 10 reps, right? And the person who practices the most is the one who usually wins. But I totally butchered what he said, but you get the point.
No, I'm a big fan of stumbling forward, like tripping your way forward. Just start, even if you trip, well, you're a lot further than you would have been if you hadn't taken that step and tripped. Right. This whole podcast was I can't believe I'm 2 years in. Like back in October, I was like, oh, 2 years, really? Like I was terrified to do it, completely terrified. Even starting video, like I kind of backed away from video a little bit, just only because I really dug into my writing and just wanted to get better and hone my craft. But I like doing video. Just right now it takes time, and I'm the only person editing. And I'm like you. I get into that editing room, and I'm like, perfection, perfect. And my wife watches it, and she's like, nope, you need to like cut out like 5 seconds here and 7 seconds there. And I'm like, oh. It actually is better when I do that. Damn it. Yeah. It's like I'm still learning all these things. All right, let's go to a couple of fun questions, and then we'll come back to some more fitness and life stuff. So, JC, what are you sort of nerding out on right now? Last night, and this will go up in a couple of weeks, but last night was the season finale of Westworld, which I've been nerding out on. And again, if you haven't seen that, I highly suggest it because I know you're a very intellectual guy and a thinker, and I think there's some deep psychological things that play out through that and philosophical things that you'll really dig. And I didn't know that supposedly, and I learned this last night, that in the painting Michelangelo's creation of Adam, if you look close enough, God is actually like the human brain.
Oh, yeah. I've seen that before.
Yeah. So there's a really cool scene about all of that. So I think you would dig that. But what are you nerding out on right now?
Yeah, so I don't have anything particularly like any books or anything that I would consider nerding out. But one thing that I saw recently I have a huge interest in this stuff. But I saw Arrival. Have you seen Arrival yet?
I have not.
Okay, so I won't spoil it for you or anyone else. But basically, we all know that it's a movie about aliens, and that's all we can really say. But I don't want to give anything away. But basically, I love these types of movies, and I know you've seen Interstellar, right?
No, it's on my list of things to see.
Okay.
I haven't seen it. Well, it's like 2.5 hours long, and every time I like start to watch it at night, I'm like, it's 8:00, and I have to be at the YMCA at 4 a.m.
Okay, so man, I'm gonna bully you until you watch this thing.
Okay.
No, so I won't go into too much of either one of those, but we both know they're about ideas of interstellar travel, and I have a huge nerd boner for this stuff, and because it makes me really think a lot about the possibilities of where we're at in the universe, how fast we progressed, why we progress as fast, blah 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 blah. Right. Another connection to this is like Elon Musk, right? Like his ideas, he wants to get us to Mars like as fast as we can, so we can save ourselves from some type of calamity or some type of nuclear war or whatever, right? But the reason I like these movies, and I like these science fiction movies, and obviously anyone who's listening to this that's watched these movies will understand, but I think, and this is totally just like, there's really no basis behind this other than just philosophically speaking and thinking about these ideas. I kind of think these movies are like these weird inferences from the future, because I always think about how anything has come to be, right? Like we have all these things in front of us. Like we can just talk about our iPhones, we can talk about our computers, books, coffee cups, whatever it is that's in front of us. Like that came out of someone's brain, right? That came out of someone's mind. Someone had to think of it. And I had a conversation with a lady a couple nights ago, she was a cultural anthropologist, and we were talking about. I asked her a question. I was like, well, if we've been anatomically modern for the last 200,000 years, why are we just now getting the iPhone? And she said, that's a good question. Well, it's probably because, and she was like, I'm totally speculating here because this is not my where my expertise is. But she's like, I think it's probably due to physics and math, because math allowed us to get so far. And if you look at anything, it's mostly due to physics and math and the ability to think and reason. And so I have this little idea, and I'm, and if anyone hates it, listening to the podcast, feel free to send me a better thought out idea or thought experiment. But I have this idea that I think these are like messages from the future, or messages from someone who knows something a little better than we do. And as a result, they make these movies into science fiction so we can kind of like be okay with it. Like we can watch it and be like, oh, this is awesome. Like this is like reading my favorite science fiction book. Like I can just like zone out for 2 hours and just really enjoy this. But for some reason, I feel like maybe it's like an inference to like what's real and what the truth is. And but we're not really ready. We're not really ready to know that aliens are among us, or there are these intergalactic beings that can exist in the fifth dimension that can tell us things about ourselves from a future self or whatever. So I don't know. I geek out over that stuff a lot. Like I like to read. There's one more thing I'll tie into this, and then I'll shut up. But there's this. You need to read this. It's a short fiction essay. It's like a pretty short thing, but it'll make you really think. And I can't think of the author's name right now, but I can send it to you later. But there's this dialogue written between. It's called like My Mind-Blowing Talk with God or something like that, and it's a story about this guy's telling it from his first person view, and he goes and sits down on the train. And he tells this story about this guy that's sitting next to him, and he looks just like a regular dude, just like a regular guy, came out of his office job. He's probably a programmer or something. And they're sitting on the train together, and he starts to talk to him, and the guy's like, starts just like probing this guy sitting on the train. And the guy telling the story is getting annoyed because he's like, look, man, I don't want to talk right now. I just want to read the paper and get home and, go on with my life, yada, yada, yada. So he starts to talk to him, and he's like, I'm God, and you're sitting next to me, and you don't even realize I'm God. And he was like, oh, here we go. We got this crazy guy on the train. And he's like, no, let me prove it to you. So he starts to tell him all this stuff about his life, and he's like, holy shit, this might be real. And so he's like, well, he was like, he's not going to guess my password. And he was like, being a programmer, I have a really long password. It's not associated or tied to anything. He will never be able to guess it. And so God ends up telling him his exact password, character for character. And he's like, holy shit, okay, this guy really is God. I need to pay attention. So they have this long conversation, and they talk about like existence and evolution and why we're here and all these really incredible things that are very like math and science ish. And it goes way beyond like our day to day. You know what I mean? It's like, it's very interstellar in like what things could look like down the line, and are we really a part of a bigger picture? Like, are we just a tiny speck, as Carl Sagan said, like tiny speck in the universe, the pale blue dot, whatever. And it's really cool. And so when I first read that, I probably read it 3 or 4 years ago, and I was laying in bed, and I was like, holy shit, this is written as fiction, but this is someone who really knows something, and they wrote this as fiction so they wouldn't be tarred and feathered, so they wouldn't be told they're like this crazy, like, messianic type of Looney Tune, they're like, get out of here. Like he wrote it as fiction so he could get his story out and message out and tell his story about really sitting on the train and having a talk with God. And God basically told him all these things, but no one would believe it if he came out on the news and said, hey, it's true, whatever, this is happening. So I don't know. I like thought experiments. I like that stuff a lot.
I think those are awesome because they really do sort of mess with your mind. I know I was listening to Tim Ferriss one time, and he was like, yeah, he went to Valve and did like the Valve VR thing. And he was like, I think it's possible that we could be a part of like some virtual reality, sort of alternate reality thing, like after having been through it. And I was like, I mean, Yeah, I guess a little Matrix-ish, but I guess, it's a thought experiment you could think about. So a couple quick questions in that sort of same line. So speaking of movies, if your life were a movie, JC, what would the title be?
Oh my God, I don't know, man. I don't know. I couldn't say. That's a loaded question. I would need to really think about that before I feel good about an answer. So I'm gonna pass on that one.
All right. If there were a store that you could go to and max your credit card out, what store would that be?
Man, I don't know. Probably. I don't know. Probably just some. I don't know, like an electronics store of some sort. Maybe like a Best Buy. I don't really know. I would probably just buy every piece of gadget that I would ever want, and I would try to build. Well, I would use it for one thing. I would do is I like to take stuff apart, and I like to look at things. So I would buy extra things that I could just totally destroy, and kind of pick them apart to like figure out how they work. Like I used to build computers when I was in high school, and I would take computers apart, and I would do that type of stuff. And I would probably just buy like the latest virtual reality, like video games and stuff. That's what I would do. And I would build I don't know, like a cave or something, like a gaming cave or something. I don't know.
I like
it's horrible. It's a horrible answer, but
the JC Deen man cave. I like it. All right, so we talked a little Interstellar and Arrival, which I've got to go see. So here it is. If you could go anywhere in a time machine, where would you go? And I know we can get into the whole paradox of time, which would be like,
yeah. So I had this conversation with someone recently, and this is a pretty steadfast answer. So I would go back to like feudal Japan, when the samurais and when they were like, they were like the shit, right? Like they were running things, and I would probably go back to that time period, and just because I'm curious as to how real like their lives were in terms of their philosophy and how they lived as warriors, compared to like what's been written down and how people depict them in movies and stuff. And I also like that because when I was a kid, I had a huge interest in martial arts, mostly Japanese style stuff, but I just never had a chance to practice. I watched movies when I was younger, and it gave me this huge interest in like Japanese culture. And yeah, I would probably go back in time, and if I could spend enough time, I would like study under a samurai, like from philosophy to fighting, to life stuff. I don't know. That's where I would go back.
I like that. I like that. I could get down on some samurai going into a time machine. Have you jumped into sort of that area of philosophy? Is that something that you pull your own personal philosophy stuff from? Because I know a lot of people today are very stoic. Do you sort of look at Eastern philosophy for your own personal beliefs?
Yeah, I mean, I don't really have I don't really have any beliefs that I would like push myself into, but for a period of time when I was really interested in meditation, like when I first got interested in meditation, I was really interested in Eastern thought as opposed to Western thought. I know that's really vague, but just like the Eastern view of the world and Eastern philosophy versus like very egocentric Western philosophy. And so, yeah, I mean, I really enjoyed studying that a little bit and kind of getting into that from just to get myself out of my Western perspective, because that's really all we can know, right? Like we have the conditioning that we're born into, the society and the conditioning, and I think the first part of like my personal, and obviously I'm not saying like I'm super enlightened or anything, but like first part of my personal awakening was like realizing that I was caught up in a lot of so-called Western values, and those Western values aren't necessarily the values of the world, right? But my world and all I saw until I traveled abroad was everything through my Western lens. And my first awakening was realizing that there was a world outside of what I had known. And then when I got into meditation and I started reading about Eastern philosophy, and then I started I read the Tibetan Book of the Dead, which is very kind of out there in it, but it made me see things and think about things from a different perspective, especially because it's written by Tibetan monks from like the 8th century. Their whole perspective on meditation and the inner world is very far removed from like so-called Western science and the reductionism, I guess.
Right.
So yeah, I really, I think just because you mentioned it, I think Stoicism's cool. I like some of the views on how to like view hard situations and hard times. I don't particularly like the view on dealing with your emotions like as a robot, and maybe I'm just misinterpreting that, and maybe some people can tell me differently, but from what I've read and how I see people toting around Stoicism online, it seems to just be like, oh, I'm going to be a robot to my situation and I'm not going to let anything affect me, which I just don't think is really healthy. But otherwise, like I love some of the Marcus Aurelius ideas. Like his book Meditations is great. It's a good introduction to, managing oneself, I believe. But anyway,
I got you. Oh, dude, I'm telling you, I really think you're gonna dig when you get some time to dig into it, and you have HBO Westworld. It's so good. I think just from what we've been talking about and like going into yourself and just like you're gonna like it. You're gonna like it. Yeah, I want to read more Eastern stuff, and I agree with the Stoicism sort of thing that people sort of act like Qui-Gon Jinn walking around with like no emotion whatsoever or like situations. I'm like, no, you need to feel your pain. Like I don't think Marcus Aurelius walked around, or Seneca walked around and didn't feel things. Like you can read that in their letters. Like they had feelings. They just tried to make sure that they were reacting in the right way and not just being emotionally, reacting to everything.
Yeah, that's a good point. And I think a lot of times people forget that. They forget that they were people too.
Right.
I think sometimes we put these people on these pedestals and we're like, oh my God, if I could just be like Marcus, if I could think like Marcus. But I think if we could transport back to their time and hang out with them, I think we would realize, they were just people too, right? I mean, you could write something in your journal right now and someone could find it 300 years from now and say, wow, Robbie really had his shit together from what he wrote here. And it very well may be true that you did have your shit together in that moment. And that couple lines or that paragraph really helped someone see things from a different perspective. But if they could come back and hang with you, they would realize, that you're just another human being too. You had some insights and some ideas that influenced them or inspired them, but at the end of the day, they're just a normal person. And I think that's part of the West. Like we tend to like exalt certain people and we tend to put them on a pedestal. I mean, just look no further than like celebrities or even politicians, right? We put these people on a certain pedestal and then we find out that they cheated on their wives or they whatever they did. They got drunk one night and got in a bar fight or whatever. And automatically you're like, oh man, this guy is amazing. Oh man, what a sucker. Like what a horrible person. And then it's just like this huge judgment, right? Yeah. And so I think we just tend to exalt people because we want to believe that someone is perfect and is someone to live up to. And I think once you realize we're all humans, then not everyone lives a perfect life, even though some people think, maybe Marcus really had his shit together. Maybe he only had it together for short, for certain periods and spurts, and that's all we're reading. Who knows?
That's so weird that I actually had this thought earlier today. I was listening to the Hamilton mixtape while I was working out. And the crazy thing that I started thinking was like, I'm listening and I'm like, there's so many people who love Hamilton who like right now, because of this musical, and like they read this stuff and you look at all of our forefathers in America and they're like, oh, all these people. And it's like, if you went back in time and actually hung out with them, you might kind of be like, man, Jefferson is kind of a dick, or like, you know what? Hamilton's kind of a douchebag. Like this guy's like kind of a dick. Why are we all so cool with him?
Yeah.
I think that's very interesting to think about that. Maybe if we went back, Marcus Aurelius was a little more broody than we think. And he just,
And then you have to ask the question, like, do the thought experiment. Is there anything really wrong with that? Like,
no.
Maybe broody. Maybe the way you see someone being a brute. Maybe that means you need to work on how you see things. I'm not saying you personally, but I'm just saying like how we judge things in general, right? Like is that really a bad thing? It kind of just depends. I think like where society is and how we talk about this stuff and how we think about it. But yeah, those are good things to think about. Like maybe. Like you said about the Hamilton, how you were talking about that, like maybe that guy was an asshole or whatever, and we just don't see it.
Yeah, I mean, we have all these people in history, and we're a well-recorded society versus, 1,000 years ago. But
of course,
we read about these people, and we admire them, and I can look at it even in the comic book view that like. I've been thinking about it a little bit more lately. That like I look up to Cap because Cap is sort of like, I have my beliefs. This is what I believe. I'm rock solid. But then if you really think about it in the film Civil War and even the comic series, Cap was kind of maybe wrong. Kind of maybe. I still don't want to admit that he was, but, I'm a fan. So, but, I think there's those points in history where like everyone sort of has those figures. Was there, so sort of final question before we sort of wrap up, because this is just where it went. And I want to ask, was there someone that like you've read about, like you were a kid and you're like, man, I love Alexander the Great. He's so cool. Or whoever else that you read about. And then as you got into them, you're kind of like, oh, why did I ever like this guy?
I actually can't really think of anyone in particular that I changed views on later. I don't really have an answer for that one, but yeah, I can't really think of anyone in particular. But I know what you're asking. I know what you're saying. Without a particular person, there were some things that I grew up with in terms of like how I felt and viewed things. So, of course, when I was younger. I viewed the world through a very narrow view because it was all that was given to me through my parents, right?
Yep.
And it wasn't just my parents. It was the school I went to. It was where I grew up in the South. It was a very narrow view based on one thing or the other. And to make a really clear example of this, you grow up and you are told, your whole life that, and this is a blanket statement, of course, that drugs are bad, right?
Right.
And you get the DAR, the DARE shirt to go with it, and not to say that that's not a bad effort, because I think there's a lot of really horrible substances out there that we probably shouldn't consume, and if you want to consume those, it should be at your own risk, and you should at least know all of the warnings. But I think that was just kind of like a misaligned effort, but I think it's probably better than nothing. But when I got older and I started to realize a few things, I started to really think critically, and I started to question everything around me, right? And then I later learned that some of the most dangerous drugs that are available to us are legal, right? So the reason I bring this up is because this is like a very narrow view. So like when I was younger, I used to think, all drugs are bad. I didn't even really understand what drugs meant. I just, I knew there were bad things. Like if you could smoke it, inhale it, inject it, it's probably bad, right? And then as I got older and I started to really think about this stuff, I started to realize that a lot of the stuff we get legally through prescription can be even worse than what you might get recreationally, right? Or something that you can even buy might be way worse. So an example of this is, and I bring this up because I actually saw something on the news this morning, and this is not news. This is just something that we're talking about because this has been going on for years. But like prescription opioids and opiates in various forms that you can get through the doctor is a huge, huge issue. And I mean, but it's legal, right? Your doctor gives you this pain medication, and you take it, and it's okay to take it because it's from the doctor. But there are people using the same medication and overdoing it and getting high and hurting themselves and getting highly addicted to it, right? And it's actually, some people that they end up going on harder stuff and they end up dying. Like, in fact, I had a friend who died from an overdose on methadone before we turned 21. It was in June of 2007. Our birthdays are in August. And I remember driving to Nashville, getting a call from a friend saying, "Did you hear about Ben last night?" And I said, "No, what happened?" And he said he died of a methadone overdose. And then, I basically just bawled and squalled for the last 3 hours on the road going to Nashville because I had this trip planned and I couldn't turn around. And I later learned that, he was on some other, opiates. He was on some other drugs that he was trying to get off of. And the doctor prescribed him methadone to help wean him off of it, right? Because the withdrawals are horrible. And he ended up dying because of a drug that was legal.
Yeah.
And there probably were other things that he could have taken that were illegal, doing air quotes here, that are way safer and have no history of death or illness, whatever. And then to even to put the cap on here, let's just look at one of the most addictive and harsh substances ever, alcohol.
Yeah.
It's been legal for a very, very long time. And we can go out right now and drink a bottle of whiskey each and not wake up in the morning, Yeah. And so I don't know, just kind of throw that out there. Like, that's one thing I grew up with, this belief, this view. And I guess to kind of tie into what you asked, like, I thought the government and I thought that doctors and those people really cared for our health and really cared for us and wanted to protect us and keep us safe. But in reality, when you really look into it, it's not really that they want to keep us safe and take care of us. There's other things that are of interest, right? Like money. And, there's a lot of money in alcohol. There's a lot of money in prescription pain medications. There's not much money in, alternatives, right? Like,
right.
Anyway, so that was kind of a different answer to the question, but
no, dude,
I think about that.
I think that's a great answer because you and I both grew up in the South, and there were a whole lot of things growing up that I thought that are wrong, maybe too strong of a word, but we're misguided in so many ways that I don't believe anymore. Or, like you, like I thought drugs were wrong. I mean, I remember being in DARE and I was like, I'm going to be honest with everyone. I kind of like, I get what they're doing with this class, but how many of us are probably going to have like a puff of marijuana? Like, we're all not going to swear off drugs. Like, a majority of us in this class are going to do something at some point.
Yeah.
Like, that's just, it's going to happen. But no, I mean, I remember that, and, drugs are wrong, don't drink, don't do this, don't do that. And then, as you sort of grow and examine and move beyond, there's a whole lot more gray, and everything was just very black and white, laid out black and white as a kid, especially in the South. But no, I agree. So JC, I know we're closing up on an hour here. I want to say thank you again for coming on. I always enjoy getting to chat with you. And I'll ask you a question off air in a second about where you might be later in the year. But if people want to know more about you and want to find your articles, which I highly suggest reading, he's a fantastic writer, where can they find you online?
Sure. So just JCD, just jcdfitness.com is the best way to find me. I'm active on Facebook. You can add me there. Just search for JC Deen. I also have a group on Facebook that's growing. If you are interested in that, find me on Facebook. I can add you to it. It's a private group, so you might not find it just by searching around. But yeah, that's it.
Awesome. Well, JC, I've enjoyed having you on. And guys, please go check out JC Deen Fitness or JC Deen Fitness, JCD Fitness, .com. And then everything else will be on show notes as well. SideQuestFitness.com/podcast. Find JC's episode, The Return of JC Deen. And I'll have all the notes on all the books, movies, and everything else that we've chatted about as well. So, JC, thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
Step up and you gotta get it fitness. Host Rob at the moment and the quest is you gotta check it and wreck it. You're breaking personal records, and with the help of the guests, you won't be guessing on the lessons. That's a +5 fierce. Got a low-key band right here. You wanna meet him, there's no better way to greet him than to strike a boss pose. Take a look into the mirror.